Hello and welcome to Lightways at Life Astrologer with me, Anna Isabel. And I have a friend with me today. I have a wonderful friend. It is Wanda Sellar, who is the president of the Astrological Lodge of London. Hello, Wanda.
Hello, Anna. Pleased to be here with you.
It's always a joy to talk to you, and it's extra exciting, the conversation we're going to have, because it's all about the seminar that the lodge is holding on the 20th of April, and it is between 10 and 4:30. This is London time, of course. And on the ticket are Stephen Forrest, you, and a couple of others.
Well, yourself and Susanna Grigger.
That's right, and Susanna. So, your talk is called The Deepening, and you are looking at the Sun, Mars, and Saturn. Some people might be a little bit surprised to discover that you're talking about the Sun and Mars, particularly in a karmic context. So, what prompted you to go in that direction?
Well, I read a lot of Alice Bailey and look at the chart or try to look at it karmically and esoterically, because there's no definite path towards reading a chart esoterically. I think we have to come to our own conclusions with the knowledge that we gain through reading and attending lectures, of course. And so I don't know if you've ever read Alice Bailey, but she is hard, not as hard as Madame Blavatsky, but she is hard because it seems as if she comes from so many different directions, and it's down to you to put it all together, a bit like a chart, really. It comes at you from all different directions, down to you to put it all together. And I kind of noticed, looking at so many different charts of friends, clients, celebrities, that when there was this connection between Mars, Saturn, and Sun, the person's life seemed to, well, usually it was quite hard to some extent, but it seemed to deepen their understanding of life. So I looked more into it. In fact, I didn't know where I was going with it. I just put the deepening into my computer because when I began to put a lecture together or an article, I just start somewhere and then allow my brain to take me in some direction. And it took me on a very definite path. It's a long-winded way of answering your question. Did it make sense?
It did indeed. And I was just thinking about that point of inspiration, because it is often, isn't it, this niggling thought that leads us to explore and ask questions. And then suddenly there's a whole new way of looking at things. And you're talking about how reading Alice Bailey, there's all these different, I guess, threads that you can weave together. And that's why I was so curious, because of that Sun, Saturn, Mars. But now if you're looking at them together, now that makes sense, doesn't it? Am I correct? Is this a correct remembrance that Saturn has also been called Lord of Karma?
Oh, most definitely, most definitely. But he's also the dweller on the threshold, which is similar to karma, of course, but karma is much bigger, isn't it? There's, but some people say bad karma and good karma. Well, let's say challenging karma. and say good karma, maybe in fact it's giving you something that you're owed in a nice way. But Saturn makes you face up to the past, basically. That's the dweller. It's so tempting to go into my talk, and I'm trying not to, but there are other names, more psychological names. And what I found in life that people come to the truth, different people, different psychologists, astrologers, come to the one absolute truth or understanding through different paths. So what I'm looking at, somebody else may be looking at in a different way.
I was just thinking about how a lot of evolutionary astrology, we're looking at the moon's nodes as well as Pluto. And of course, the moon's nodes were available to the ancients, but not Pluto. And I'm going to be looking at Chiron, Pholus, and Nessus, again, not available to the ancients. So Saturn carried, I think, extra meanings that perhaps we have stopped looking to him for. So we may be looking at Pluto about, for death and karma, etc. But I think originally Saturn would have been the one, the that was linked with death.
Yes, well, Saturn, Pluto, Mars, they're all linked with death, really, in different ways. Saturn, because it will give you the limitation. This is as far as you go. Pluto, because it will change a situation into something that you cannot go back to. And Mars just kills you in war without thinking. Yes, they're all linked to death. And I have Saturn, Mars, and Pluto in a triple conjunction from my 12th house to my ascendant. So my very first connection with life was death because I was born dead. And so, I hovered between life and death as soon as I came onto this plane. And I think I've lived in that no man's land for most of my life, looking at life and death. And I think that's what took me along this path of what is it? What is it? Life and death. What are the two things? And they're very linked to the moment of the deepening, to the moment of Saturn, where you can't go any further. You have to find a new way or deepen your understanding that you can't live life superficially, basically. That's what it's about.
I, I was just thinking that perhaps uh, a subtitle to our seminar could be The Reckoning. Um, because it's, the conversation I had with Stephen last week about his talk, and we were looking specifically at Pluto um, in this context. And it's whenever we're talking about karma, there is always that feeling of having to face up to something. And so he's looking at the moon's nodes. As I say, I'm looking at Pholus, Nessus, and Chiron in a different context again. But what the threads always come back to is those moments in life where we can't escape and have to face up to something. And it's really important that we have some idea of what's being asked of us. What is the challenge? Because if we don't understand the challenge, we're much more likely to be defeated by it.
Exactly. And that's why the sun is so important in this trio. Alone, Mars and Saturn may cause greater problems, but with the Sun there, and we've all got Mars, Saturn, and Sun in our chart, it's when they're linked in some way that you begin, or you have at least the opportunity to begin your understanding of the situation. And that there could be many combinations, and everybody experiences it so differently as well. And it's not all doom and gloom either. It can be, as I say, deepening in a really good way, and you do marvelous things with it as well once your understanding has been let's say shone upon, that's what I need to do, so to speak.
It is important because you're right, with the sun, if we think about the sun as representing how we are growing and our unfolding, then there is going to be an element of, well, you're meant to be experiencing life through that prism of the sun, because that's what you're meant to do. That's why you chose to be that sign, why you've come in on that moment, and all of the aspects to the sun are going to have something important to say. But with Saturn and Mars, um yeah, you can't go by superficially, can you?
No. And what it has also taught me, which seems very simple when I say it, but it's taught me just how everybody is on a different rung of the ladder, on a different moment on the path, and you can never judge anybody because they may not have your understanding, and you may not have somebody else's understanding. And I think to myself sometimes, oh my God, there's just nothing on television. But there is for everybody else who watches it. It's because it doesn't interest me anymore, because it's not deep enough, most of it. Um, but for somebody else who may look at me and think, God, isn't she superficial? I don't think many people think that, although they might do, because I have a superficial side to me, laughing and joking. But yeah, you cannot judge anybody, that everybody's on that different moment of understanding.
Maybe we might do well to define what we mean by deepening, because that in itself might be a very subjective concept.
Well, it is subjective for everyone. It's going to um, deepen some people to a greater extent than others. You know that your life has deepened when your attitudes to various things have changed. And whilst I don't want to go into them now, one of them is when you begin not to think about yourself so much. That's just one of the things that you don't wake up in the morning and say, oh, I've got this to do, I've got that to do, I've got this. You wake up and you might say, well, you'd have to be really great to do this, but you might say, how can I make somebody else's life happy today? That may be too much of an extreme from one to the other, but it's along that path. So that is one of the deepening moments. And everybody will find, it depends on what level they were beforehand, because two different people can have a deepening experience, and one will be much deeper than the other, depends where they were. So it's not just one thing.
Exactly. I was thinking that the moment where we start to deepen is the moment when we stop taking things at face value
Yes.
and questions, and the moment when we step out of the daily stuff of life and start thinking about a bigger picture. So I feel like it's like a lens of where your focus is. So you can either really focus in on the detail to deepen your understanding of, let's say cleaning. This is a superficial activity, isn't it? Until you begin to see that actually it can be a ritual with symbol behind it. And that what what made you hate doing cleaning before now is a magical experience because you have attached a deeper meaning to it. It's not just about, getting the dust out of the corners. It's about tending lovingly to your nest or creating a beautiful environment for your family. So you're putting love into it. That's a deepening. So there's one focus, but then it's looking at pulling back at the bigger questions. So really, maybe what I'm saying is that it's about meaning and asking the questions that bring meaning to the mundane.
Well, that's what the deepening is all about. It's because you begin to step back and ask the question, what is this all about? Rather than go with everyone else. That's why they talk about crowds can all act with the one thought and feeling on the lowest common denominator, because they are not thinking at that moment, that they're just, I suppose, feeling what somebody else. That's probably how Goebbels managed to send all those messages to the German people in the Second World War. It was a sort of propaganda sent to them, and they to on the lowest common denominator, where they began to think almost as one in the way that they were told. And there were a number of people who didn't go along with that, because they had come to the realization of maybe they were deepened, maybe they had come to the thought of, I'm thinking for myself now. And that's the I suppose that's the danger, really, that a lot of people don't think for themselves. Of course, many do and many don't.
And it depends on context as well. And you mentioned Goebbels. Well, many have been busy since doing exactly what he did, perhaps more subtly. But yes, it's a common thing, and people might call it groupthink. They might call it mass hypnosis. Those are words or terms that have been used very recently and quite frequently in the last few years. But I'm very interested in what you were saying. Is that when we when we have an experience that snaps us out of groupthink or out of the common way of perceiving. So what I mean by a common way is, up until now, this has been my worldview, and something has just happened, and it's, even if it's for a few seconds, it's making me go, oh, is there, what's that all about? And at that point, we either go with that question or we are scared and we bury it.
Yes,
And
you have the choice. Yes.
you always have the choice. And I think when we're talking about things from a karmic perspective, it's important to understand that we do have a choice.
Mm. That's why Saturn, planet of karma, is exalted in Libra. You have a choice. Which way do you go? They call it the narrow razor's edge. It's like you can fall this way or that way. That is what choice is about. And I like to think that the astrological chart is about choice as well. That you just because it's in the chart, it doesn't have to be in the most negative way or expressed in the most negative way. The person has the choice. I think it's quite hard, though, sometimes to make the choice because the event may happen anyway, whatever it is, but you have the choice how you react to it.
And that's what it's all about, is the reaction. Because if we just react blindly, then we are, the example you gave, of the group thinking, so that group think mentality, or following the crowd, um, that's one choice. But you're right, because I think the chart always asks us, who do you want to be? What is the best and highest version of yourself that you can be? And do you want to be that? And things do happen to us, that are out of our control. You were born dead. Now, you that happened. Um, how did it affect you? Well, yours, I would say you're somebody who grabs life with both hands and really runs with it. Um,
I'm trying to chase death away, probably, because
but
I
that
think
there's
it's round the corner all the
yeah,
time.
there's an impact there. And the more we are aware of the way in which we are impacted by things that are out of our control, then the more choice we have as to how we're going to be the best version of ourselves.
Yes, yes. Um, but this comes with knowing that, and that's the deepening. That wakes you. It's a waking up moment, really, which is kind of strange when you think Saturn and Mars are to do with death. But the sun there, it wakes up because perhaps it takes you to the to your limits, and then you have to look, and the sun's about illumination. It suddenly lightens you up, you see, and you can do something with it. The thing is, often moments like that, well, they're more than moments, they can be months, years, your lifetime. It's wonderful having that moment, but you then have to face the changes that it brings. And so that's why you may not decide to look more deeply or go with the changes. Or maybe you can't make changes. It's different for everybody, but that's what happens. And maybe that's why relationships break up, because one person may be further along the path than the other person. They start off, say, as youngsters, madly in love, and they're roughly at the same level. And then slowly their interests take them along different paths. And maybe one has a greater deepening moment, so to speak. And either they stay together and unhappily, or one of them, or both really, because they can't really fulfill each other, or they part. And of course, we can part in this day and age, but of course, once you couldn't. You had to stay in the marriage, really. But I suppose a lot of women weren't necessarily educated, so they were um, forced into the sort of like prison of domesticity, and they had to take that role. Um, but if you had money and you were educated, perhaps you could make that move. So yes, today, I mean, nobody wants to break up a relationship, but that's one of the reasons. That's quite a high reason, really quite an exalted reason that your mind, your feelings are in a different direction to your partner's, and that does happen.
I had an image when you were talking about the sun and Saturn and limits, and just it's I had this image of walking along a road, and then the road is, oh, there's a cliff. This is the end of the road. There's a cliff. And so that's the limit. That's as far as I can go, because if I go any further, I'm going to fall off the edge of this cliff. And then you mentioned the sun illuminating. And so it's okay. I'm just going to have a look around. Oh my goodness, I didn't see it, but there's another path over there. And now I've got that light on there. So it's easy to see that. I'm wondering about Mars. Would Mars be like the stimulus that's pushing, driving, or creating reaction?
It could be. I think all three planets are a double-edged sword here, because they can all create the event and then they give you the weapons to fight it with. So it gives you both sides, both sides. So you have the strength. But talking to you, some things have elucidated for myself with my own talk. For instance, when we talked about the group, I think what it's about, where we talk about the group, is we have to change the group feeling to group thinking. The from the mass feeling to the mass thought, where people think as one, as opposed to just feel as one. And feelings aren't always a good arbiter of choice. And the other thing you said, you and Steve were talking about Pluto quite a lot. Well, interestingly enough, the examples that I'm going to give do involve Pluto to some extent. Yeah, to a great extent as well. So I think when Pluto comes into the picture, it's often a collective group. It's the masses. You have the moon rules the masses and Pluto rules the masses, doesn't it? You have, so it's the masses really with Pluto. It involves lots of people. But I think when Pluto's part of the picture as well, it's going to create something much deeper still.
It's levels of consciousness that are being developed, I think. And I'm as I'm exploring and pulling together the material for my side of things, um, always I'm looking back at the nodes and going, how does this tally with that? How does this tally with that? Because I'm liking to and Pluto, and I'm looking at Pluto, and I'm looking at the nodes, and I'm thinking, okay, so this is the story as being told by these three centaurs. So how does that tally with that? And indeed, and I have also been looking at the sun as well. How does it tally with the sun? Because the sun is our mission statement, so to speak. Yeah, this is I have been born to do this. So it's very interesting to see how these might all tie together to illuminate, and perhaps reveal the why, so that we are empowered. Because it's when we're stuck in that why is this happening that we feel, very much the victims of fate. But when we put that into a perspective that says, well, it's part of your development and your growth, and let's look at past traumas and see how they have contributed to your growth. Now, maybe we can't quite yet see how this is helping you to grow, but 10 years, 15 years, it will be more clear. And, I, like everybody else, there are a few moments in my life that I wouldn't say, I can't say I feel gratitude for, because they were incredibly painful and horrendous. But and I wouldn't choose to go through them, but I can see the value. And in fact, there are several incidents, in my early life, particularly, where I would never choose to do that again. And I can't say I feel grateful for the fact that it was the way it was, but I am grateful for the result.
Well, you made a very important point when you said you can see the value, because the value does shape one's karma thenceforth. If you can see the value, then you can act with forgiveness and forgetfulness. Forget it, it doesn't matter anymore. You don't dwell on it, you've learned. But if you don't see the value, I mean, so you can finish your karma to some extent with that approach. But if you don't see the value and have resentment and anger, then you promote that as well. That's how wars continue. This country did this, so now this country's doing that. And in families as well. Well, Uncle George, well, he hurt your mother, so now the mother's having a go at this. So it continues. So that's karma. That's how it continues. So I would say all four of us are using ordinary astrology, although astrology is not ordinary, but the usual. And we're bringing our own studies and knowledge to our interpretation of the karmic situation.
It's an exploration of how we can look at a chart, dare I say it, in a deeper context, of looking at it to really help make sense of not just who we are, but why we are, and not just why we are because of our history, but why we are because of what we are here to develop and learn.
Mm-hmm. And that's really what it's about, isn't it? It's a school of life, and how we go along with it. But not everybody feels like that. They look upon life in a more hedonistic way. And as I said earlier, they cannot be judged. That is where they are. And then they have that, maybe they have that moment. What I've realized too is that you may have that particular connection in your natal chart in different ways, which I will explain. But it could come upon you in transits when the three of those get together. And I haven't explored that too deeply, except in one very, very important example, which I will be showing on the 20th. But I think it's really possible that none of us can escape those threesome. Either it's in your chart, or if it's not, then excuse me, then it is, it can happen as a transit. The three get together and affect something in your chart.
Well, I am now really excited about your talk and can't wait to be there on the 20th with you to see what you do with this. And
Mm.
so,
Same here, same here. I'm really excited to be with you and Steve and Susanna.
so a reminder to everyone that what we are talking about is the seminar that is taking place through the Astrological Lodge of London on the 20th of April from 10 till 4:30. And so the good news is it doesn't matter where you are in the world, it is online. So you can join us. And for those of you who might find 10 in the morning London time to be an unearthly hour to be rising, it is being recorded. So just I'll be putting a link to it on the in the description box so that you can get your tickets now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wanda, for a very, as always, deep conversation. Um, so thank you very, very much. And thank you all for watching. I hope that we will be seeing you on the 20th of April. But then before that, we're going to be doing some more exploring of other topics. Until then, goodbye.